All right. We are live. What's up, everybody? We're about to go live with Peter Martin and Dr. Charles Goldfarb on on a Zoom call, as I'm sure we're all familiar with at this point. So just bear with me here as I bring them up. Everything's just a little slow this morning as I'm getting this going. But we thought today we were going to talk about, we're going to do a You'll Hear It episode all about hand health. We've gotten a lot of comments. Everybody's practicing a lot more now, which is awesome. But there's been a lot of questions about hand health and how do I keep my hands from getting sort of repetitive stress injuries, things like that. So hopefully Dr. Goldfarb can give us some insight into how to treat our hands in a way as musicians, as pianists and drummers and guitarists and whatever you play, in a way that really keeps our hands healthy and strong as we have all this free time to practice and are hopefully practicing quite a bit. So I'm going to bring up Peter Martin and Dr. Charles Goldfarb of Washington University Medical School, and we're going to talk about hands. Thank you for joining us here. Give us a shout out in the comments where you're from, and if you have any questions about hand health, feel free to go for it. This is what this chat is for. And then this podcast will be up next week on our You'll Hear It podcast, and we'll so you can revisit it if you'd like. Give me 1 second as I bring up the boys. Yeah, so give us some shouts out. Where are you from? And do you have any questions about hand health, about injuries or repetitive stress or anything like that? Now is the time. What's up, Dan? All right. Hello? What's up, guys?
We are live. So we are live here. We're doing a live You'll Hear It with me. I'm Adam Manis.
I'm Peter Martin.
And with us today is Dr. Charles Goldfarb of the Washington University School of Medicine. Chuck, thank you for being here today.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
And you are actually at Washington University Medical Center, deep social distance, deep quarantine, hard at work today, right? I mean, they're doing the podcast with us, but actual doctoring is going on.
There is doctoring going on. There's not a lot of doctoring going on for those with elective practice like my surgery, but there's doctoring going on, and I'm out in the office solo.
Awesome. So we're already getting great questions, which we're going to get to in a second. But what we wanted to talk about is, with all of our guests, whatever the hell you want to talk about. But in particular, we have a lot of pianists and just a lot of musicians, and we're always a little bit piano-centric, but almost every instrument, say, except for maybe vocals, uses their hands in interesting ways. And I know you've, treated a lot of athletes, a lot of musicians, a lot of, just folks in general. Everybody pretty much has hands. But the way we use them in music is, especially as pianists, is very unique because we'll often a lot. And a lot of folks now are going through a period of deep practice, which is wonderful in terms of you're sheltering at home, you're stuck at home, and a lot of professional and semi-professional and aspiring musicians are spending more time at their instruments than ever. But we're hearing about, some injuries, maybe overuse, that type of thing. And so we want to just, as we have you on the line here, get some of your advice about all that. But I thought I could just sort of preface things with a little bit of a background on our relationship. And you've done doctoring of my hand when I had an injury that was not related to piano, but was a little bit more related to sports. But if you would, Dr. Chuck, maybe could you just give everybody a little bit of a run through of what your specialties are, because they're super interesting. And I know there's certain areas that you really cover in depth.
Absolutely. So, like you said, I am at Washington University in St. Louis. I'm a hand surgeon, and my practice is a little unusual. So, about a third of my practice is sports and athletes, and I would throw you guys in that category. About a third of my practice is kids born with unusual hand conditions, and about a third of my practice is what I would call bread and butter hand and upper extremity nerve and arthritis and problems like that, and makes for interesting days with a wide variety of patients, and makes it fun, keeps it fun, treating kids and adults. And I've been here in St. Louis since 2002, practicing, and I think I met you somewhere around there, not too long after that.
Yeah, I think 2005, 2006 or so when we first came back to St. Louis.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I should just say, in case folks, you're probably already realizing, like, wow, okay, he's this wonderfully accomplished, accredited doctor, but he's so good on a podcast. That is not by accident, because Dr. Goldfarb, along with one of his partners, has a wonderful podcast called The Upper Hand, one of the great titles to a podcast. And if you get a chance, we're going to link to that both here on the YouTube and the podcast. Check that out. And even if you're not if you're a young aspiring hand surgeon, this would be like gold. I mean, could you actually skip medical school if you listen to all your episodes? Is that legal?
That is a great idea. Maybe I'm not going to push that one out there, but there's enough quality content, perhaps.
But it's really cool. Like I'm such a fan of podcasts in general, and a fan of yours and your podcast. And it's so interesting because and I don't even know if you realize this, it gives a little bit of it kind of pulls the curtain back a little bit on the world of being a surgeon, because you and Dr. Chris, are at a little bit different places. You're partners, but you're at a little bit different places in your career. And so it's a fascinating look at how you guys interact and the different stages you go through, talking about residency and fellowships. I learned the difference between a resident and a fellow. And so I'm not going to be calling anybody my resident fellow, because it's two different things. See, I know that. But you guys do it in a really interesting and cool way. And so congrats on that.
Thank you. We've heard that Chris is a little younger, or a lot younger than I am. He was my fellow, which means 1 extra year of training doing just hand surgery. And people recognize he's a little deferential to me, which is not the goal. The other problem we have is we never disagree, which is a bit of a problem. You want a little excitement, a little disagreement. So we're working on that.
Your biggest fault is you're too agreeable.
That's right.
Well, actually, yeah. I mean, Adam is a little younger than me, but I've been trying to he's not deferential at all. He's not doing it right now because he knows we're friends, but he's usually super domineering with everything. And,
of course.
Cool. Okay. So among your specialties with hands, I noticed you did not mention hand washing, which is very topical. Does that not come under your purview of your practice?
It's an interesting subspecialty, but no, I can't claim it. Although I have become a personal expert, I had no idea that you needed to wash for 20 seconds or sing happy birthday twice. But like you, I hope I'm taking it really seriously and doing it all the time. My hands need lotion, which I've never done in my life. And it's really fascinating.
Well, I was going to ask you, because actually, on a serious note, I've been washing my hands so much, but I don't know if this has happened to you, Adam, but the piano feels different and the keyboard feels different. And I haven't really had pain, but I've had a little bit of like jarring, just difference and a little bit of discomfort. And I was wondering, the thing with lotion for pianists is tricky, especially if you're playing a lot of keyboards like we are, if you can't get to a real piano or whatever, is that it gets slippery. So I can't do a lot of lotions, but I've definitely felt a difference it's a tactile difference in the keyboard.
I knew I'd learned something. Yeah, I think that when I lotion, it's really on the back of the hand. I'm certainly no expert, or I don't use a lot of product anywhere. But I don't know about the fingertips or the pads of the fingers, as we call them. Yeah, I would see how that could be problematic for you guys.
Yeah. That's a great idea, though, the back of the hands. That's a good one for pianists to try.
Yeah. So we get a lot of questions about, is there anything that we can do off the keyboard for our hand health, to stay strong, to stay healthy? Is there anything that in general you would recommend to keep your hands in a good spot?
It's a great question. It's one that's actually hard to answer. I guess I've been most familiar with those who play professionally in the symphony, and I've seen a good number of such patients in my office, and those patients come in for specific problems. As far as general hand health, I think it's a matter of, and this is getting to the point of the whole issue, which is not overdoing it. And you may not overdo it until you've overdone it. But like any athlete, I would say, if you really have a tiresome session and you're going for too long, icing afterwards, taking Motrin, if you have one or two muscles which are really clamping up on you, really trying to stretch through it is hard, which sounds silly for the hand, but it does make sense and it does work. So those are the things I would say. If you have a long session, if you have achiness, it's okay to probably push through it, but if you have sharp pain, stop.
That's great. And so it's interesting you say, like any athlete, talking about musicians. And I think that really resonates with me and a lot of the things that we, from a musical standpoint, that Adam and I, advise to, oh, okay, we're still there. That especially the piano, well, every musical instrument kind of has its specific technical uh, difficulties and things to overcome, and that's when we talk about practicing on an instrument, it's usually about overcoming. Like with piano, fingering is a big thing. How are you going to finger these things? What is your arm position? What is your shoulders and all the things? But a piano is it's a big machine with a lot of parts, and you need a lot of power to play it. So I always think the athletic side of it and how you're going to harness your energy to be able to pull that out does have an athletic it's kind of a mindset that can be good. We talk about, Adam's really good about talking about breathing, and we bring in some meditative kind of things in terms of how you practice, so that mainly you can keep your body from getting, like, practicing. A lot of times we get hunched over because it's intense, almost like you're at a computer, when you're really doing in that kind of flow state, but it can lead to a lot of just these kinds of aches and pains, soreness, and then, even probably difficulties when you're probably seeing symphony players coming in. I guess, is that, I don't want to throw a medical term out there, is that acute pain, would you call that?
When a symphony player comes in?
Yeah.
I think it's usually what I would say acute on chronic. So something may be underlying, and then an event or a session makes it a little worse.
Okay.
The analogy with you guys, I think, would be patients that are labeled workers' compensation or work injuries because they have been typing too much, and that gets to the ergonomics of putting yourself in a position to succeed. So for piano playing, it means not playing piano with your hands up, making sure the bench is at the right height, make sure your shoulders are in a good position. The wrist should be relatively neutral. So those things are key.
Well,
There's
luckily,
a question about sax, playing the saxophone. And again, I guess the shoulders and elbow positions, it's just a matter of not playing in an awkward position.
Yeah.
Well, luckily, all those things also help you, sound better. Having great positioning, comfortable positioning, your body just, when it's comfortable, you play better, you get a better sound, you can play with more control. So listen to your body. We talk about it all the time about getting a good posture, feet on the floor, straight spine, breathing. And if you feel discomfort somewhere as you're playing, there's probably a position that you shouldn't be in. If that keeps happening. And so the doctor just confirmed that for you all, so you can keep listening to what we have to say. I know, Peter, we always preface that we're not surgeons, but we just got expert reinforcement right there.
We can say we're surgeon approved now, right?
I think you got a little checkbox in your
Well, and this is going to, for folks that follow us closely at the podcast, or Adam and I with Open Studio, it's going to sound like a setup, because Chuck, what you just said, even about the wrist, being in a neutral position, I think you said it in terms of at the keyboard. That's something that I learned from a really good teacher when I was young. And I've always preached that and taught that and talked about, we talk about that a lot. And I've done videos on that, certainly not from a medical or even injury standpoint, but just from the standpoint of being able to effectively pull the sound out and create the music that you want to at the keyboard. I've always also said that I haven't suffered any serious injuries. I mean, yeah, I've gotten sore. Sometimes I take a break or whatever, but I've always felt that, the more natural we are, just like, athletically, in terms of like the more natural your technique is, the less chance there is for you to be able to repeat over and over again and do something that is going to bring you injury. I just never known that was medically proved.
Yeah, it's interesting because for some people this comes easy, right? Just like any other sport. For some people their shot's natural. For other people they have to work on it. I would assume and I'm not a musician myself, that I don't have a musical bone in my body, but I would think for some people they have to work on being comfortable and being relaxed, and you can get there, but it just takes some more concentrated effort.
That's great. That's great.
Is there?
You want to get to some questions, Adam? Do we have any?
Well, no, I had a question. So
Okay.
sometimes we get asked too, like, I injured my playing basketball, Peter, or some other activity. Is there anything like, I have a good friend who is an ER nurse at Children's Hospital here in St. Louis, and she's like, I would never ever let ride an ATV because I see too many of those all the time. Is the equivalent of that for a hand surgeon? Is there something don't do that for professional musicians out here who don't want to risk a possible career stalling injury?
Peter's got a good story about that. I think it directly applies to him. Peter, you start, and then I'll jump in.
Okay, yeah. So we'll get the patient and the doctor's collective of that acute illness. No, so I was actually Chuck, in addition to being a wonderful surgeon and wonderful father and just a nice all around guy, is also a serious amateur basketball player. I mean, on like, we joke about being semi-professional in our athletic endeavors, but we've played together quite a few times, and he's a great player, like a great. And sometimes it's not an insult when you say he's a great thinker. It means they're not. He's very athletic as well, but he has great court vision. And like when people, when people talk about like, wow, you're such an intellectual player, they mean I'm playing like an intellectual, But no, Chuck's a great basketball player. We've had a lot of fun playing together, and there was a period where the regular game that we played, I would only go to the game if I saw Chuck on the email that he was going to be attending, thinking my hand surgeon will be there, thus mitigating any problems.
You are an intellectual player.
But I did have an injury once, and it shows I shouldn't have showed up when Dr. Chuck wasn't there. Was not in attendance at the game, and I dislocated my left thumb. And I had never dislocated. I jammed my fingers a lot over the years, so I kind of felt like I was fine, and I'd never broken anything in my fingers or my hands or anything. But it was clearly dislocated, and one of the yahoos at the game was like, "I'll pop it back in." And there actually was another doctor. I don't remember if you remember. Pete Crawford was actually at the game. He's not a surgeon. He's I think I'm not sure what kind of doctor.
Cardiologist, maybe.
Cardiologist, right. And so he was the one who's like, no, you're not popping anything back in. It's like, we're calling Chuck, and you were out of town, and we called you, and I think I took a picture of it, and you gave me some. You were like, okay, go down to my hospital, to Barnes, and or whatever, BJ, whatever it was called at the time, and you called some folks there, and I was quickly admitted in. It was actually, you had so much pull there. I think I was put in front of some gunshot wounds and like some arms, but they were like concert, and I think you described me as a concert pianist, so they were like, there was a lot of jumping around. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but anyway, I got back there, and I think I was with some of your residents or fellows that were there. They came over, and they popped it back in, but in a different kind of way. I think there was X-ray done first, and then my wife showed up, very hysterical, but already getting very angry when she saw I was going to live through it. Because there was a lot of, why are you playing basketball? You're a pianist. That's how you make your living. But anyway, it was the X-ray, I guess, showed that it wasn't broken, and then you were able to see that, and it was put back in, and it was banded, wrapped up, that kind of a thing. And so that was the only really bad injury. And actually, a week later, I was able to play. I had a gig. It was like a local, kind of a small charitable thing, but I really wanted to do it, and I was able to play. I think I still had it wrapped some, and you had looked at it maybe by that point. But maybe that was a real lucky.
Well, yeah, a couple of things from this. Philosophy is I want to keep players playing, whether that be basketball or get you back to your job, if that happens to be as a professional pianist. I think it's incredibly important. I know that I think you stopped playing ball for a while because Kelly said, you cannot do this. And I didn't like it then. And I think eventually you must have worn her down because I know you hit the court again. I think almost every injury you can deal with. Almost every injury you can deal with. And sure, there's risk. I think our risks are actually pretty similar. If I play ball and I hurt a finger, this can affect my ability to get back in the operating room. But you know what? Life's short. I think you should do what you have fun with. But I will say, for those like people who are on ATVs, or right now, everyone's sheltering, but kids are out in the backyard playing. And what I see when I walk around my neighborhood, everyone's going crazy on their scooters, and no one's wearing helmets or wrist guards. And you know what that means. There's going to be falls, there's going to be injuries. So I hope people are smart with how they go about with the activities.
Let me ask a question, Chuck. So I have been watching a lot of MMA lately, which I'm like new to the game here, but I'm loving it. And so like I was watching some the other day on YouTube, and I was like, I'm gonna learn jujitsu. And then I texted a friend of mine who's like a lifelong jujitsu guy, and I was like, how often do you injure your fingers, hands, wrists, or arms jujitsu? Like, not a lot. He said probably 5 times this year. Is that like, as a professional pianist, should I stay away from combat sports?
Again, I don't know. I'd stay away from that dude. I think that you got to exercise some common sense. My nephew is a martial artist and is really good, and like literally 3 days before he's heading off for his freshman year in college, he was trying to pass his black belt test and broke his metacarpal, broke his hand. Ended up getting surgery, and the whole thing was a debacle. But he's back out fighting again. Again, there's probably technique there as well, to minimize your risk unless you're actually grasping or sprawling, or sparring with somebody.
That's great. He just yelled to his wife that he's starting MMA. See, it's like you wrote him a prescription.
Yeah.
Start MMA. Well, I love that. Was like supposed to be a softball question for you. Like, as a pianist, should I do MMA? Yeah. And Chuck is like, well, maybe. Why not?
Yeah. Life is short.
No, but I do think this. We talked about this before, like the concept of the benefits of being in, staying active and participating in, especially sports that you're passionate about, that you can really, bring so much to your fitness in general. And then as you come back as a musician, as an athlete musician, what it can bring maybe is worth a little bit of the risks of some of these things happen. Is that what it sounds like?
I think, we talk about in sports, we talk so much about the adolescent athlete. We talk about the kid who starts playing soccer at age 10 versus the kid who plays multiple sports for as long as possible. And there's no doubt it's beneficial to stay active in multiple different ways. It's good for the muscles. It's good for everything. Mm-hmm. I think that applies here. The more active you are in general, the better your body's going to hold up. And if you just do one thing, if you sit at the piano and just play piano for multiple hours a day, it's hard. It's harder on your body, and you're less likely to be resilient against injury.
Oh, this is a really good question, Peter. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but there's a lot of armchair doctoring going on with piano technique, and so
this podcast.
Yeah,
I mean, when Dr. between you and I, usually we're trying to minimize it today, but yeah.
No, so there's like this, someone asked, so the thing they told you outside the club about some tendons of your hands connected to your torso and others connected to your back is true. So that this is something that when we talk about learning piano technique, we talk about. I've heard that these 3 fingers are connected through tendons up to your chest, and then these 2 are on a different path that end up in your back. And I was always like, is that true, or is that total horse poop?
So that's total no. So yeah, there's 2 kinds of muscles or tendons in the hand. There are ones we call intrinsic, which start and finish in the hand. So the entire muscle and tendon is within the hand itself. And those are the muscles of the fleshy part of the thumb and some of the muscles between the fingers. Mm-hmm. And then there's muscles that start in the forearm and finish in the hand. Those include, ones that bring your wrist back or contribute to straightening your fingers. None of the muscles in the hand go above the elbow. Truly, I mean, they kind of come close, but really don't go above the elbow. They definitely don't go above the shoulder, and they definitely don't connect to your back. But I think what it gets to is this whole kinetic chain idea that anything you do with your wrist, the elbow, position of the elbow matters, position of the shoulder matters, even your torso matters. So it's all connected, but not directly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I had a piano teacher once that was like having me pull my 4th and 5th fingers, like imagining from my back. And I was like, I don't know if this is real. This doesn't feel real to me. Good to know.
And I think that's like a lot of times where maybe hopefully not on this podcast, but take it a little bit too far in terms of like using your whole body from a conceptual standpoint when you play the piano is very important. But what we shouldn't do is then to actually say because it is connected in a way that it isn't. But in terms of positioning stuff, I think that it is important, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it goes back to what we started talking about. I not directly connected, but everything's connected. And position of one joint affects the muscle power and function of each other joint. So sort of, I guess the message is the correct one, but the specifics probably aren't accurate.
Now, what about something that we do advise often just from personal experience and also sort of teachers saying this and a little bit of common sense, is this idea of when you're really doing intense practice, especially like intense, I mean, like you're in that flow state, you're a little bit unaware of everything except either the composition you're working on, the music or whatever, is to like put a timer on so that like 2 hours don't go by when you're in the same position you thought it was like 10 minutes. And I'll do this because I've had this problem before. So I'll do like 50 minutes, 45. For me kind of works. And then I just force myself to get up as much as I want to keep going and walking around, maybe do a little bit of stretching or something. And it seems to work. Would there be any medical foundation to that, or is that just something good to do?
I don't know if I could say medically, but it absolutely makes sense. Totally agree with that, because when you stop thinking and you're so focused on the task at hand, you don't think about positioning, and you can get muscle fatigue. And then what happens is you get muscle fatigue, you get muscle substitution. So you're asking muscles that shouldn't be helping with the task to do the task. And then it just leads to this kind of event, which is not good. So I think that makes all the sense in the world.
Okay.
But
something that, sorry, go ahead, Adam.
No, I was just going to say, too, I like this idea of sort of musician cross training. I've not really thought about that we spend hours and hours in this one position working these very specific muscles in our hand and somewhat up to our elbow. And then ways like doing some exercises to sort of cross train those. Like even for me, I notice when I'm consistently doing push-ups, I have less strain on the piano somehow. And I always attribute it to I'm just stronger, but it's probably like I'm like working out some of those muscles in my hands and wrists as I'm just supporting myself on regulars as some cross train. I think it's an interesting thing to think about as pianists, that it's cool to like try to work those muscles as we practice scales and connect music to our brain, but like doing a little bit of like different kinds of exercises off the piano could probably help reduce the injury. And then I'm suppose just like any other cross training, like you're building up those supportive muscles that aren't the primary muscle when you're playing. That could have been all just made up just there, but it's logical.
I'm wondering if a cross training regimen we could come up with something specific. I don't think we could, but it sounds good. I like it.
Yeah.
So someone's asking, and I know this is we don't want to push you into any kind of telemedicine, but someone's asking about numbness in my left hand as a guitar player. Maybe just the general idea of like, when do we as musicians know, like, what is the signal where we need to just, as you said earlier, take Motrin or whatever? Does it cross over to you really need to go see a specialist? And I mean, I know that we're in a special time, pandemic, in terms of it's hard to have access to doctors if it's not emergency, but when do you kind of know when it crosses over into something serious?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And first of all, I will say that many practices, ours included, are transitioning to offering telehealth or telemedicine. So 3 weeks ago, we didn't have a single telemedicine visit. And now I think our group alone, orthopedics at Washington University, I think does 150 a day, 150 visits a day. And while you can't do everything over a video chat like this, we can usually figure things out and then help with treatment. You're right. I don't want to get into specifics, but I will say the question about numbness and tingling, and what we worry about with numbness and tingling is carpal tunnel or another pinched nerve. And one of the things that we want you to avoid, no matter what instrument you're playing, is a position of constant wrist flexion or elbow, hyperflexion, trying to show it. Those two positions, together or separate, are not healthy on the nerves crossing those joints. And so again, getting back to the posture comment, but if numbness truly is there, whether it's brief or whether it's constant, if it continues to come back, if it's intermittent, I think that's a reason to see a doctor, especially if it becomes constant. Any condition that becomes constant is concerning.
And then would you typically, with somebody in that situation, go to their your general doctor? Would you want to go straight to a specialist, an orthopedic, or you kind of want to go straight there?
I'm a little biased. It depends on the primary care physician. Some of them are really good and they can start the treatment process. There's nothing wrong in certain, cities and practice types and going straight to the specialist. I think that's a hard one to answer for everybody, though.
Got it. Cool.
Yeah, definitely key if you're experiencing any kind of those sharp pains, though. Like, don't wait on it. Go see someone soon. Don't try to play your way through it, especially if it just keeps up consistently.
Totally agree with that.
Yep. Ooh. What about like hand exercises away from the piano and stuff, and just general things? Is there anything that's ever been? I mean, I know there's stuff that people do, and I used to have those balls that, it felt good, but then I think it was more of like a
90s.
a meditative, very 90s, very 90s. Remember, that was great. And then there was that
hemp necklace too with it to go.
Yeah, hemp exactly. CBD lotion and the balls and the hemp necklace. I'm ready to practice, But is there any kind of exercise or that could actually be helpful?
If I'm reading you right, those balls are like two balls that make a little noise and you rotate them around in your palm.
Yeah,
that probably makes sense. And then just anything with stress balls actually are something that I recommend relatively frequently.
Stress balls. And you know what? I used to do that around the same time. Stress balls. Sorry,
this is my personal down.
Podcast. I am, man. This is my personal. I'm getting advice, man.
Yeah, we're pros around here. We're not messing around.
No, the stress balls. I remember really liking that. The ones I didn't like, and I always felt like were a little bit. You remember the ones that had springs for every
those are
finger. That didn't seem, because it was like, a big thing with piano is, of course, our fourth and fifth. Like, you want to be able to play with all 10 of your fingers equally. And there's all these exercises and books about, independence of the fingers, independence of the hands. That's another issue. But the fourth and fifth finger, look at that, exercises for independence of the fingers.
Oh, wow.
So it's about strengthening, your fourth and fifth finger, and then dealing with the thumb, which, unless you're an orangutan, which many have said I am, is shorter than, so it's like you're playing at the piano, which is just flat. I always said, like, if we could develop a piano that was curved, it'd be easier, because we're dealing with different lengths to our fingers and thumbs, but you have to use all of them in theory equally. So a lot of the stuff is about strengthening the fourth and fifth fingers. And I've always felt that there's definitely like a, your brain is controlling all these things. So you've just used these more and stuff. So it's about using them more. But those things with the springs and stuff came about for a lot of, and I remember when I was a Juilliard, they used to be like, oh yeah, you've been doing the springs. I was like, man, it kind of hurts when I use it. That couldn't be that good. But could that actually even strengthen your fingers anyway?
I don't know if I buy it, because most of that flexion strength you get from the forearm muscles. Again, if it hurts when you're doing it, don't do it, is the bottom line. Right. All right, I got a trivia question for you. Putting medicine and piano together. So there's we use a lot of eponyms in surgery, like the Colles fracture or the Jones fracture or things like that. And certain things have kind of layman's terminology. So we have a fracture in the hand, which we often see in adolescents, called the extra octave fracture. So this is for you guys. What do you think extra octave fracture is? And maybe you'll tell me I'm totally wrong in the use of that. The extra octave fracture is when you break the base of your fifth finger. Yeah. It typically goes out more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The idea is that it expands your range. Is that the right word?
Wait, I want that.
Yeah,
Can I purchase that injury?
I have a weird, I don't know if you see that, but my pinky just naturally like hangs out there. And I think it's from years, especially like that one, like gets way down from being able to hit those. Like you see that.
That's impressive.
Yeah, our hands will change when we try to do all that stuff. So I don't need that.
Well,
fracture.
there's and I mean, really seen as like a positive for pianists, the bigger reach you have, and there's certain like a tenth, which is kind of my maximum. That's a little bit aspirational for, I don't know, maybe half the people or something. Like that's good. I don't have particularly large hands, but I can reach that, and so like that's, you can even go beyond that.
11th,
but
buddy.
11th and stuff.
Well, if you get,
he's just showing off now.
If you get a 10th, what does Adam get?
That was 11th.
I can get an 11.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Kind of. I can kind of get an 11. Yeah. That's a big stretch.
But the 11th doesn't have. It's not like the 10th really has some very good musical applications. So if you can almost get it, it's sort of like, oh, I want to get there. But I've always wondered, and I've never told anyone this, but I felt like, you know, I mean, my range definitely got bigger. I felt beyond when I just was growing. But is it possible the more you are stretching that you could actually extend that? I mean, without the actual extra octave injury that you talked about.
Yeah, nobody
You
go
know,
fracture their pinky, please.
Yeah, right.
Not recommend.
Yeah.
I think you can. I buy it. I do buy it. There are rigid structures. We call it, like, one of them's an intermetacarpal ligament, which looks like that's what Adam maybe have stretched over time. I don't think I've seen it on a day-to-day basis, but I would guess you can. Yeah, and get some joint. The joint itself probably it becomes a little more mobile with time.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. This is great.
Dr. Goldfarb, thank you so much. This was really, really awesome. We should do this again soon because this was super fun. The three of us will stick around after this podcast is over just for a minute to just wrap it up. We're probably not going to keep this on YouTube because of some video issues that we're having, but check out this over on You'll Hear It, the You'll Hear It podcast on our audio podcast. The audio is still good for this. So thanks everybody for the questions. And thank you, Chuck, for joining us.
That was fun. You got podcast heroes.
Check out the Upper Hand podcast. I got the link in the YouTube I dropped there, and it'll be on the show notes as well. So check that out when you get a chance.
Awesome.
And until tomorrow,
you'll hear it. All right. Thanks everybody on YouTube for the great questions and for sticking around, even though we have some kind of jive video going on. Like I said, we're going to take down this video, but we're going to put it over on the audio side of things. So thanks everyone.
Yep.
Cool. It's good.
We're good. Thanks, Chuck, man. This was.
I hope that was. I don't know what you guys were shooting for. Hopefully it hit the mark.
No, it's great. It's great. I have the feeling people are going to want to. I know there was a bunch of questions on there that we're going to want to get to, so maybe we could do it again.